Cancel his rehab, save the money. The words drifted through the quiet hospital room as clearly as if someone had shouted them into my ear. My wife Melissa was still holding my hand. Anyone walking past the doorway would have thought she was a devoted wife praying beside her injured husband. Then she leaned closer. So much money for therapy when he'll probably never recover. It's pointless. My chest screamed. Not from pain, from betrayal. A second voice followed. Tyler, my 34-year-old stepson. He chuckled under his breath. I'll take his mansion. I've always wanted to remodel it anyway. Melissa laughed softly. We'll wait until everything's official. I've already got plans for the place, Tyler replied. The garage alone is worth more than most people's houses. Neither of them noticed the tear that escaped the corner of my eye. They thought I couldn't hear. They thought I couldn't understand. Most importantly, they thought I couldn't remember. They were wrong. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 62 years old, and until 3 days ago, I believed I had built a life most people only dream about. I built neighborhoods across North Carolina, not luxury skyscrapers in Manhattan, not casinos in Las Vegas, neighborhoods. Places where teachers, firefighters, electricians, nurses, and retired couples could afford beautiful homes. For nearly 35 years, I worked before sunrise and came home after dark. I wasn't born wealthy. My father drove a delivery truck. My mother cleaned motel rooms outside Charlotte. Everything I owned had been earned one brick at a time, including the 3-story stone mansion overlooking Lake Norman. People often assumed I loved the house because it was expensive. Truthfully, it reminded me how far my parents' sacrifices had carried me. Then 3 days ago, a pickup truck ignored a red light. I never even saw it coming. The doctors later told me my SUV rolled twice before crashing into a concrete barrier. Multiple fractures, internal injuries, a traumatic brain injury, a stroke during emergency surgery. When I finally opened my eyes, my body refused to obey me. I couldn't speak, couldn't lift my arms, couldn't even turn my head. The machines surrounding my bed made more noise than I could. And somehow, that silence became the greatest advantage of my life. Earlier that morning, I had heard Dr. Patel speaking quietly outside my room. The swelling is improving, he told Melissa. Mr. Carter understands more than we originally believed. Will he recover, she asked. We don't know. He'll need months of aggressive rehabilitation. Months. That single word carried hope. To me, apparently not to my wife. The doctor continued. It'll be difficult, but patience with determination sometimes surprise us. Melissa thanked him politely. She even cried. I heard every sniffle, every shaky breath, every perfect performance. The second the doctor walked away, she became someone I no longer recognized. Their footsteps disappeared down the hallway. Silence settled over the room once again. A minute later, the door opened. Soft footsteps. Not Melissa. Not Tyler. Emily, my private nurse. She had been assigned because my doctors believed one-on-one care would improve my chances. She couldn't have been older than 35. Kind eyes. Calm voice. The type of nurse who explained everything she was doing even when she assumed the patient couldn't answer. Good afternoon, Mr. Carter, she said gently. I'm going to check your IV. She adjusted the tubing, checked the monitor, then stopped. I know that look. Her voice dropped. I think you're awake. I forced every ounce of strength into opening my eyes wider. She leaned closer. Can you understand me? I blinked once. Her eyebrows lifted. Oh. She glanced toward the hallway before returning her attention to me. If you understand me, blink twice. I did. Her hand froze over the blanket. My goodness. She whispered so quietly I almost missed it. They said you weren't responding. I blinked again. Tears filled her eyes. Don't worry. I'm not telling anyone until we know exactly what you want. Exactly. What? First. Wanted? The words echoed through my mind. For the first time since the accident, someone was asking me, not talking over me, not deciding my future, asking me. There was one problem. I couldn't speak, not even a whisper. Emily seemed to understand my frustration. Can you move anything? Nothing. My fingers refused. My legs were gone from my awareness. Only my eyes remained dependable. Then, an old memory surfaced. My younger sister, Sarah, born profoundly deaf. Our parents couldn't afford private schools, so they learned American Sign Language with her. I learned too. I was only 10. For years, we talked across crowded rooms without making a sound. I hadn't used ASL regularly in decades, but muscle memory is a remarkable thing. I focused every ounce of energy into my right hand. Nothing. Again. Still nothing. Emily noticed the smallest twitch in my index finger. She leaned forward. Try again. The finger moved. Barely. Enough. Pain shot through my arm. Again. Slowly. Painfully. My thumb shifted. Then my index finger. Emily watched without breathing. You, she whispered. You're trying to sign. Relief flooded through me. She understood. I closed my eyes from exhaustion. When I opened them again, she was smiling. I know a little ASL. My younger brother is deaf. For the first time since waking, hope replaced fear. It wasn't much, but it was enough. One careful movement at a time, I formed the closest thing I could manage to a single word. Lawyer. Emily stared. You want your attorney? I blinked twice. She looked toward the hallway. Does your family know you're communicating? I blinked once. No. Do you want them to know? Again. One blink. No. She nodded immediately. I understand. There wasn't an ounce of hesitation in her voice. She wasn't judging. She wasn't asking why. She simply accepted that I had a reason. Then she surprised me. I'll help you. That evening, Melissa returned carrying flowers. She kissed my forehead. I'm here, sweetheart. Her perfume almost made me sick. Tyler followed behind carrying coffee. I talked to the insurance company, he announced. They'll probably fight some of the rehab costs. Melissa sighed dramatically. We'll cross that bridge later. I wanted to laugh. Not because anything was funny, because neither of them realized the bridge had already collapsed beneath their feet. Emily entered a few minutes later to check my medications. She never looked at me, never hinted that anything had changed. She played her role perfectly. Professional, calm, invisible. Exactly what we needed. Melissa eventually gathered her purse. We'll come back tomorrow. Tyler nodded. Get some rest, Daniel. The door closed behind them. Emily waited until their footsteps faded. Then she quietly pulled a small phone from her pocket. I found the emergency contact listed before your wife. She looked at me. Michael Lawson. I blinked twice. She smiled. I'm calling him. She stepped into the hallway. Less than a minute later, I heard a man's voice through the speaker. This is Michael Lawson. Emily took a slow breath. Mr. Lawson? She glanced back toward my room. Mr. Carter is awake, and he has something very important to tell you. I barely slept that night. Not because of the pain. Pain medication kept most of that under control. It was my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Melissa's voice. Cancel his rehab, save the money. Then Tyler's smug reply, I'll take his mansion. For years, I'd worried about losing my business, losing money, losing my health. I never imagined the greatest loss would be discovering the people sitting beside my hospital bed had already begun celebrating my funeral. And around 7 the next morning, Emily quietly entered my room carrying a cup of coffee. Not for me, for herself. She smiled as though nothing unusual had happened. Good morning, Mr. Carter. She checked my blood pressure, adjusted my blanket, then leaned close enough that no one outside the room could hear. Mr. Lawson is coming. I blinked twice. He'll arrive before your wife gets here. Another blink. Emily understood every answer without making me exhaust myself. She had become my voice less than 12 hours after meeting me. That kind of trust isn't built overnight. But sometimes tragedy introduces you to exactly the person you need. At 8:15, an older man wearing a navy suit walked into my room carrying nothing but a leather briefcase. Michael Lawson, my attorney, my friend for 28 years. We'd built companies together, closed hundreds of property deals. He'd helped me write every version of my will since my first wife Linda passed away from breast cancer almost 15 years earlier. The moment he saw my eyes open, his shoulders relaxed. My God, he stepped beside my bed. I was preparing myself to say goodbye. I wanted to smile. Instead, I blinked. Emily quietly closed the room's blinds. I've already explained everything I observed yesterday, she told Michael. He understands everything. Michael nodded, but he can't speak. Emily looked toward me. Not with words, she gently lifted my right hand. Mr. Carter, can you show him? I concentrated. The effort felt like trying to lift a truck using a single finger. Slowly, my thumb moved, then my index finger. Pain shot through my arm. Again. Another movement. Michael frowned. Is he? Emily smiled. American Sign Language. His eyes widened. I completely forgot. He looked back at me. Sarah. I blinked twice. He remembered my sister. Everyone who truly knew me remembered Sarah. Melissa never bothered to learn a single sign. She always said she'd never have a reason. Life has an incredible sense of irony. It took nearly 20 minutes for me to communicate one complete sentence. Emily interpreted patiently. Michael wrote everything down. The first sentence I signed was simple. My wife wants me to die. Michael immediately shook his head. Daniel, that's a serious accusation. I painfully continued. Emily translated. She told Tyler to cancel rehabilitation because it costs too much. Another pause. They discussed dividing your property. Michael's face slowly changed. He wasn't skeptical anymore. He knew me. I wasn't emotional. I wasn't impulsive. If I was accusing someone, there was a reason, Emily quietly added. I heard none of it personally. But when I found Mr. Carter awake yesterday, he specifically asked for you before anyone else. Michael slowly removed his glasses. Tell me everything. For nearly an hour, I signed. One exhausting movement after another. Every word Melissa had whispered. Every sentence Tyler had spoken. Every detail I could remember. By the end, Michael's notebook was filled. He leaned back in his chair. I've represented wealthy families for over 30 years. I've seen children sue parents, brothers steal inheritances, business partners destroy lifelong friendships. But this, he looked at me. This is different. He opened his briefcase. Before we do anything, We need to review your estate. That sentence alone reminded me why I'd hired Michael decades earlier. He never reacted emotionally. He solved problems. He spread several documents across the small hospital table. My first question, did Melissa ever pressure you into changing ownership of your companies? I blinked once. No. Did she become a shareholder? Again, no. What about the Carter family trust? No. He smiled for the first time that morning. Good. Emily looked confused. Michael explained quietly. Daniel built everything before this marriage. The trust owns most of his major assets. The mansion, the development companies, the investment properties, the lakefront land. Melissa lives in those homes. She doesn't own them. Relief washed over me. At least one version of myself had remained cautious. Michael continued. The joint checking account contains enough money to tempt someone. But compared to your total estate, he smiled faintly. It's pocket change. Emily looked surprised. So legally. She doesn't inherit everything. Michael chuckled. Not even close. Then his expression became serious again. But there's another issue. He turned toward me. If Melissa truly believes you're mentally incapacitated, she may try to gain conservatorship. My heartbeat quickened. He continued. Once someone controls medical decisions, they often gain tremendous influence over financial matters. Emily folded her arms. Can she do that? Not if Daniel is mentally competent. Michael tapped the notebook. And not if we move first. He began outlining possible legal options, emergency court filings, medical evaluations, temporary financial restrictions, protective orders. Everything sounded logical. Everything sounded fast. Yet something inside me resisted. I slowly lifted my hand. Emily watched carefully. No. Michael frowned. No. I continued signing. Slowly. Painfully. Need proof. He stared at me. You already have your testimony? Again I signed. Not enough. He understood. If Melissa denied everything, it would become my word against hers. No jury, no family, no judge should have to wonder who was telling the truth. I wanted certainty. I wanted the truth exposed so completely that no one could ever rewrite what happened. Michael leaned back, then smiled. I think I know exactly what you're planning. Around 10:30, Melissa arrived carrying homemade blueberry muffins. She smiled brightly at everyone. Oh, Michael. I didn't know you were here. He stood politely. I wanted to check on an old friend. Melissa wiped an imaginary tear from her cheek. It's heartbreaking. I don't know what I'd do without him. I watched her performance from my hospital bed. If the Academy Awards had a category for grieving spouses, she deserved a nomination. Tyler wandered in behind her wearing sunglasses indoors. Morning. He barely looked at me. Instead, he turned toward Michael. So, how's all the legal stuff? Michael answered casually. Nothing to discuss. Tyler shrugged. Guess we'll wait. Exactly. They would wait because they still believed I was trapped inside a broken body with no way to fight back. Emily quietly adjusted my IV. As she walked away, our eyes met for less than a second. No smile, no signal, nothing anyone else would notice. But I knew. The game had already begun. That afternoon, after Melissa and Tyler left for lunch, Emily returned holding my tablet. She had connected it to my home's private security system. A notification flashed across the screen. Motion detected. Location. Carter residence. Home office. Emily's expression tightened. She looked at me, then slowly signed. Someone is removing documents from your house. I stared at the screen for several long seconds. Then, despite the pain ripping through my arm, I signed two simple words. Emily swallowed. You want me to let them? I blinked twice. She nodded slowly, then repeated my words aloud. Let them. Because sometimes, the fastest way to expose a thief is to let him believe no one is watching. By the end of the first week, everyone believed I was exactly where they wanted me. Broken, silent, dependent. That illusion became my greatest weapon. The doctor saw a patient making slow progress after a catastrophic accident. Melissa saw a husband who would never question another credit card statement. Tyler saw an inheritance with a heartbeat. Only 3 people knew the truth. Emily, Michael, and me. The next Monday morning, Michael arrived carrying another leather briefcase. This time he looked almost cheerful. I've spent the weekend reviewing everything. He closed the door behind him before speaking again. Daniel, you built your empire like a man who never trusted luck. I blinked. He opened several folders. 23 LLCs, 4 holding companies, the Carter Family Trust, and 3 separate investment partnerships. Emily looked impressed. I had no idea. Michael smiled. Most people don't. He turned toward me. You always said one lawsuit shouldn't be able to destroy a lifetime of work. I remembered saying exactly that nearly 20 years earlier. Back then it had sounded overly cautious. Now it was saving my life. Melissa only has unrestricted access to the joint household account. He paused. Everything else requires your approval. I blinked twice. Good. However, his smile disappeared. Someone has already tried. He slid a document across the bedside table. Emily picked it up. What is this? A request to transfer corporate voting rights. She frowned. Who submitted it? Michael answered calmly. A law firm. But not mine. He looked directly at me. They claimed your condition made you permanently incompetent. My heartbeat jumped. Emily looked horrified. They've only been in the hospital a week. Michael nodded. Exactly. They're moving much faster than grieving families usually do. I slowly raised my hand. One painful movement at a time. Who hired them? Michael sighed. We're confirming that now. But I have a strong suspicion. Neither of us needed to say her name. Well, later that afternoon, Melissa walked into my room carrying fresh flowers. White lilies. My late wife, Linda, had hated lilies. Melissa knew that. She had simply forgotten. Or maybe she no longer cared enough to remember. She kissed my forehead. You look peaceful today. I stared at the ceiling. She sat beside my bed. I've been taking care of everything. Our bills, the house, the business calls. I don't want you worrying. Her voice sounded warm, comforting, almost believable. Then her phone vibrated. She stepped into the hallway to answer. Emily happened to be checking my medication cart just outside. When Melissa disappeared around the corner, Emily quietly looked toward me. I'll be right back, she followed. Not close enough to be obvious. Just close enough. 5 minutes later, she returned. I heard enough. She lowered her voice. She was talking to someone named Grant. She said, Emily hesitated. The paperwork should be ready before he's discharged. Another pause. No, he doesn't understand anything. I closed my eyes. Not because I was surprised, because hearing it still hurt. That evening, Michael brought someone new. A silver-haired woman wearing jeans boots and a navy blazer. This is Rebecca Hayes, licensed private investigator. Rebecca smiled politely. I've worked with Michael for years. She looked at me. And I don't believe coincidences, Michael explained. I hired her yesterday. Rebecca opened a thin notebook. Your wife has developed a routine. Every morning, coffee shop, fitness club, hospital. Every afternoon, several unexplained meetings downtown. Every evening, dinner with Tyler. She turned another page. Yesterday, they met with a luxury realtor. Emily frowned. A realtor. Rebecca nodded. They toured your mansion. She slid several photographs across the table. Melissa stood on the front lawn laughing. Tyler pointed toward the detached garage. Another photo showed them walking through my home with a well-dressed couple. The realtor carried blueprints. My stomach twisted. They weren't waiting for me to die. They were already planning the renovations. Over the next several days, Rebecca's file became thicker. Tyler ordered custom furniture. Melissa met twice with a financial advisor she'd never used before. A moving company visited the mansion. The excuse, future remodeling. Meanwhile, no one visited me except Emily and Michael. Melissa shortened her visits from an hour to 30 minutes, then 20. One afternoon, she stayed less than 8 minutes. Before leaving, she kissed my forehead. I miss your smile. The door closed. Emily looked at me. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. There was one thing Melissa never bothered to ask about. My rehabilitation. Because she assumed it wasn't happening. Officially, it wasn't. Unofficially, Emily had arranged something entirely different. Every evening after visiting hours ended, she wheeled a physical therapist named Kevin into my room. Kevin had retired from the VA hospital system 2 years earlier. Emily trusted him completely. So, Kevin said with a grin during our first session, I hear you're stubborn. I blinked twice. Emily laughed. That's his way of saying yes. The exercises were brutal. My fingers cramped. My shoulder burned. Every attempt to move my left leg felt like dragging concrete uphill. More than once I wanted to quit. Kevin never let me. You built neighborhoods. I blinked. Then build this. He tapped my arm. One muscle, one movement. One day, I hated him for saying it. Then I started believing him. 2 weeks passed. I could now lift 3 fingers. My right arm responded more consistently. I even managed a crooked smile one afternoon. Emily clapped like I'd won an Olympic medal. That's huge, she laughed. You have no idea. Actually, I did. Every tiny improvement meant one thing. Melissa's timetable was getting shorter. Mine was getting stronger. Rebecca's investigation continued. One Friday evening, she arrived carrying a small flash drive. I think you'll want to see this. Michael plugged it into a laptop. Security footage appeared on the screen. A private dining room inside an upscale steakhouse in Charlotte. Hidden camera angle. No audio at first. Then, the sound began. Melissa lifted a wine glass. I honestly thought he'd die that first night. Tyler laughed. So did I. A man's voice spoke. Likely the realtor. What happens if he recovers? Melissa shrugged. He won't. The doctor said rehabilitation takes months. Tyler leaned back. And we're making sure that never happens. Silence filled my hospital room. Rebecca folded her arms. I've already preserved copies. Michael didn't speak. Neither did Emily. I stared at the screen. Every doubt disappeared. Every excuse vanished. There it was. Not suspicion. Not misunderstanding. Choice. They had chosen greed. Again and again and again. Rebecca reached into her folder one last time. I have something else. She pressed another button. A different recording began. This one came from the hidden camera inside my own home office. Melissa stood beside my desk. She thought she was alone. She smiled, then quietly said the sentence that changed everything. The sooner he dies, she looked toward Tyler, the sooner we're free. No one in the room moved. Not even Emily. Michael slowly closed the laptop. He looked at me for a long moment, then finally spoke. Daniel, I think we have all the proof we'll ever need. I looked at him, then at Emily, then slowly raised my trembling hand. One sign, one decision. Not yet, because I wasn't interested in winning quietly. I wanted the truth. To walk into the light. 3 weeks after the accident, I stopped measuring time by dates. I measured it by victories. The first time I lifted my right hand without help. The first time I stood for 5 seconds beside the hospital bed. The first time I managed to swallow without coughing. Each tiny achievement felt invisible to everyone except the people who truly cared. Emily celebrated every one of them. Kevin pushed me through every painful step. Michael quietly built the legal foundation beneath us. Meanwhile, Melissa and Tyler continued building their fantasy. They believed they had already won. Whoa. One Tuesday morning, Emily wheeled me into the rehabilitation room before sunrise. The hospital halls were almost empty. Only a few nurses exchanged sleepy greetings as we passed. Kevin was already waiting. So he said, folding his arms, "Today's the day." I looked at him. He grinned. "You're walking." Emily smiled. "He doesn't look convinced." "I don't care if he believes it," Kevin replied. "His legs are ready." Mine certainly didn't feel ready. The parallel bars looked a mile apart. Kevin locked the wheelchair. Stand. Simple word. Impossible task. Emily slipped one arm around my back. Kevin steadied my left shoulder. I pushed. Nothing. Again, every muscle in my body protested. Then, my knees straightened. For the first time since the accident, I was standing. Only for a moment. But I was standing. Emily laughed through tears. "I knew you could do it." Kevin didn't smile. "One step." I stared at him. He pointed forward. Just one. My right foot moved. Barely 6 inches. Then my left. Pain exploded through my hip. Sweat rolled down my face. I almost collapsed. Kevin caught me. "What did I tell you?" I took another step. Then another. When we finally reached the end of the bars, I realized Emily was crying openly. "I've watched miracles before," she whispered, "but never one this stubborn." I wanted to tell her she had saved my life. Instead, I squeezed her hand. She understood. She always did. That afternoon, Michael arrived carrying several thick folders. "I have good news." He placed them on the table. "And I have unbelievable news." Emily poured him a cup of coffee. "I'll take unbelievable." Michael chuckled. "So will I." He opened the first folder. Rebecca's investigation is complete. Photographs, financial records, phone logs, property listings. Every page added another brick to the wall surrounding Melissa and Tyler. They've met with the realtor 7 times. They've interviewed 2 interior designers. They've contacted an auction company about selling artwork from your mansion. Emily frowned. They're selling things that aren't even theirs. Michael nodded. It gets worse. He opened another file. Tyler listed several pieces online. Antique furniture, a grand piano, my late wife's crystal collection, items that had never belonged to Melissa. My jaw tightened. Linda had spent years collecting that crystal. Each piece reminded her of trips we'd taken together. Tyler saw only dollar signs. Michael handed Emily another document. "What is this?" "A reservation." "For what?" He sighed. "A funeral home." I stared at him. He continued quietly. "Melissa met with them yesterday." Emily looked horrified. "But he's recovering." "She doesn't know that." He nodded toward me. "She planned the service." I closed my eyes. Not because I was grieving. Because I suddenly remembered the promise Linda and I had once made. If either of us died first, there would be music, stories, laughter, a celebration of life. Melissa had chosen expensive flowers, luxury limousines, premium catering, everything except love. 2 days later, Rebecca arrived carrying another envelope. "I thought you'd want to hear this in person." She placed a digital recorder on the bedside table. The moving company owner cooperated. Michael pressed play. Tyler's voice filled the room. "I don't care if he's still alive. I want everything packed the day he leaves the hospital." Another voice asked, "What if he comes home?" Tyler laughed. "He won't. My mom's already looking at assisted living facilities." Emily covered her mouth. I stared at the ceiling. So, that was the plan. Keep me alive just long enough to sign away my freedom. Then hide me somewhere convenient. The mansion. The business. The life I'd built. All theirs. They had mistaken kindness for weakness. That evening, Michael unfolded a fresh set of legal papers. "I think it's time." I already knew what he meant. For nearly an hour, we worked through every document. Because speaking remained difficult, I answered mostly through sign language and written responses on a tablet. The first document, a new will. Melissa remained in it. Exactly $1. Tyler received the same. Emily looked uncomfortable. Isn't that harsh? I slowly typed a response. $1 proves I didn't forget them. Michael smiled. Exactly. If they challenge the will claiming they were accidentally omitted, he tapped the document. This ends that argument. The next papers transferred additional charitable gifts. Scholarships for nursing students. Funding for rehabilitation centers serving stroke victims. A trust for families who couldn't afford long-term physical therapy. Emily looked at me. Why? I typed another sentence. Because someone else shouldn't lose hope because of money. Her eyes filled again. Then came the surprise. Michael slid a cream-colored invitation across the table. The Carter Foundation Annual Gala? I smiled. Every October, my foundation hosted a fundraising dinner in Charlotte. Business owners, teachers, local politicians, scholarship recipients, veterans, hospital administrators. Nearly 400 guests attended every year. Melissa had already announced publicly that I would not be there. She intended to accept an award on my behalf. Tyler planned to introduce himself as the future chairman of the foundation. Michael leaned forward. I've confirmed they both accepted. Rebecca grinned. They're already practicing their speeches. Emily laughed. They really don't know you. Michael looked directly at me. Daniel, are you absolutely certain you want to do this publicly? I didn't hesitate. I raised my hand. Slowly, deliberately, then signed. Truth deserves witnesses. The room fell silent. Rebecca finally broke it. I've investigated wealthy people for 22 years. Most want revenge. She looked at me. You want accountability. I nodded. There was a difference. Revenge satisfied anger. Accountability protected the innocent. If Melissa and Tyler could betray me this easily, who else would they eventually destroy? So, over the following week, my recovery accelerated. I could now walk short distances with a cane. My speech therapist finally allowed me to practice simple words. The first word I managed wasn't help. It wasn't pain. It wasn't even my own name. It was, no. Emily laughed when she heard it. That seems appropriate. It was. Because for nearly a month, my entire life had been defined by one quiet decision. No. No to surrender. No to fear. No to letting greed rewrite my legacy. The gala was only 7 days away. Melissa was choosing her dress. Tyler was rehearsing his speech. Neither of them realized they weren't preparing for a celebration. They were walking straight into the courtroom they had built for themselves. That evening, as the sun disappeared beyond the hospital windows, Michael gathered every folder, every recording, every photograph, and every legal document into a single locked briefcase. He stood beside my bed and smiled. Everything is ready. I looked out the window for a long moment, then turned back toward him. With a steady hand, I signed 3 words. 1 more week. The Carter Foundation Gala had always been my favorite night of the year. Not because of the tuxedos, not because of the speeches, certainly not because of the attention. I loved it because every dollar raised that evening changed someone's future. Over the years, we'd funded scholarships, built playgrounds, renovated veterans' housing, and helped families who had nowhere else to turn. For 23 years, it had never been about me. Ironically, this year it would become exactly that. Et so, the gala was held at the Grand Bohemian Hotel in downtown Charlotte. Nearly 400 guests filled the ballroom. Business leaders, doctors, teachers, construction supervisors who had worked beside me for decades, several city council members, a few local reporters, even Dr. Patel and members of the rehabilitation team had been invited. Melissa had insisted she attend as my representative. She arrived wearing a long black designer gown, elegant, expensive, almost appropriate for a widow. Tyler followed beside her in a tailored tuxedo. He shook hands confidently, introducing himself to anyone important enough to recognize. I'm Daniel Carter's stepson. He smiled proudly. I'll be taking over many of his responsibilities. Several people congratulated him. Others simply nodded politely. Those who truly knew me found the statement strangely premature. Yarn. Rebecca stood near the back of the ballroom pretending to check her phone. Michael chatted casually with several board members. Emily sat quietly at a corner table wearing a navy blue dress. She looked uncomfortable being surrounded by wealthy donors. When she noticed me waiting inside the service corridor, she smiled. You ready? I took a slow breath. My cane rested firmly in my right hand. I've been ready. The words came slowly. Still rough. Still imperfect. But they were mine. Emily squeezed my shoulder. I never thought hearing 3 words could make me cry. I smiled. Don't start now. She laughed softly. I'll try. Inside the ballroom, Melissa stepped onto the stage. The audience applauded politely. She accepted the microphone with practiced sadness. I wish Daniel could be here tonight. She paused dramatically. As many of you know, his condition remains very serious. She lowered her eyes. Our family appreciates your prayers. Tyler stood near the front row, nodding solemnly. Melissa continued. Although Daniel may never fully recover, the ballroom doors slowly opened. No one noticed at first. Then someone near the back gasped. Heads began turning, one by one, like dominoes. Silence spread across the room. Melissa stopped speaking. Tyler slowly turned around. His smile vanished. I stepped into the ballroom, one careful step at a time. My cane touched the polished floor. Click, another step. Click. Every sound echoed through the silent room. Melissa's face lost every trace of color. Dizzy Daniel. Tyler looked as though he'd seen a ghost. No, he whispered. That's impossible. I continued walking, slowly, deliberately, not because I needed dramatic effect. Because I was still recovering, Emily stayed several feet behind me. Michael quietly walked toward the stage. The audience remained completely silent. When I finally reached the front, I looked at Melissa, then Tyler. Neither could meet my eyes. I accepted the microphone. For a long moment, I simply stood there. The room waited. Finally, I spoke. The word came out strained, raspy. Another breath. Heard. Tears filled Melissa's eyes. Everything. No one moved. No one even coughed. I heard, my wife. Cancel. My rehab. Melissa stumbled backward. Daniel, please. I raised one finger. She stopped talking. I heard, my stepson. Claim, my mansion. Tyler shook his head frantically. You're twisting things. Michael stepped onto the stage. I don't recommend interrupting. His voice carried across the ballroom, especially considering what's about to be shown. A giant projection screen lowered behind us. Michael nodded toward the audio-visual technician. The first video began. Hospital hallway security footage. Melissa entering my room. Tyler following. Timestamp. Date. Everything verified. The room remained silent as subtitles appeared beneath the recording. Cancel his rehab. Save the money. A collective gasp swept across the ballroom. Melissa covered her mouth. That recording is illegal. Rebecca stood. No. It was lawfully obtained under hospital security procedures after concerns regarding potential financial exploitation. Melissa looked toward Tyler. He looked ready to run. The second recording began. The steakhouse. Wine glasses. Laughter. The doctor said rehabilitation takes months. We're making sure that never happens. Someone in the audience whispered, "Oh my God." Then came the third recording. My home office. Melissa smiling. The sooner he dies? Tyler answered. The sooner we're free. Several board members lowered their heads in disbelief. One elderly woman quietly began crying. She had known Linda and me since the beginning. Tyler suddenly pointed at me. He's setting us up. Michael calmly held up another folder. Bank records. Another folder. Forged authorization requests. Another. Attempted transfers of corporate voting rights. Rebecca added. Phone records. Property listings. Moving company contracts. Emily quietly stood beside me, without saying a word. Exactly where she'd stood since the first day she believed me. Melissa finally broke. She dropped to her knees. Daniel, I'm sorry. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I looked at her. For a brief moment, I remembered the woman I'd married. The vacations. Quiet evenings on the porch. Birthday dinners. Christmas mornings. Then I remembered the hospital room. Her hand holding mine. Her whisper. Cancel his rehab. Fear didn't explain that. Greed did. Tyler tried another approach. This is all because of money. I slowly shook my head. No. My voice grew stronger. It's about trust. He opened his mouth again. Before he could speak, two detectives walked into the ballroom. Neither wore uniforms, just dark suits. Professional, calm. One approached Michael. He handed over a thick evidence binder. The detective nodded, then turned toward Tyler. Mr. Tyler Brooks. Tyler's face drained of color. We need to speak with you regarding allegations of fraud, attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and document forgery. Melissa stared at them. What? The second detective looked at her. Mrs. Carter, we'll need to speak with you as well. The ballroom remained completely silent. No applause, no celebration. Just truth. Raw, unavoidable. As the detectives escorted Melissa and Tyler toward a private conference room, Tyler looked back at me one last time. Hatred filled his eyes. Mine held something different. Sadness. Because despite everything, this wasn't the ending I'd once imagined for my family. Emily stepped beside me. You okay? I looked around the ballroom, at the employees who had helped me build neighborhoods, at the scholarship students, at the nurses, the veterans, the families. Then I smiled. For the first time in weeks, it wasn't forced. It isn't. You're over. Michael nodded knowingly. No, he smiled. But justice has finally begun. People often think revenge ends the moment the guilty are exposed. It doesn't. That night at the gala wasn't the ending. It was the beginning of everything that came afterward. The investigations, the lawsuits, the apologies, the healing. Justice, I learned, moves much slower than anger, but it lasts much longer. The weeks after the gala passed in a blur of attorneys, investigators, and physical therapy appointments. Every morning, Kevin still insisted I walk a little farther than the day before. You've got another lap in you, he'd say. I don't. You do. I don't. He'd grin. You sound stronger every time you argue with me. For the first time in over a month, I laughed. A real laugh. Not because life had become easy, because it finally felt like life again. Emily laughed too. There he is, she said. The stubborn man everyone kept telling me about. Yeah. The legal process moved quickly once the evidence became public. The recordings from the hospital, the surveillance footage from my office, the forged documents, the attempted transfer of voting rights, the financial records. Together they painted a picture no jury could ignore. Melissa was charged with financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult conspiracy to commit fraud and several related financial offenses. Tyler faced additional charges connected to forged documents and attempted theft through fraudulent representation. Neither charge accused them of wishing I had died. People are free to think terrible things. The law punishes actions, and they had taken plenty of those. Within 2 months, Tyler also lost his real estate license. The licensing board reviewed the evidence independently. Integrity mattered. He had none left. One afternoon, Michael walked into my office carrying a familiar folder. Except this time, it wasn't inside a hospital. I was back at Carter Development, back behind my own desk. The room looked exactly as I'd left it before the accident. The framed photograph of Linda still sat beside my computer. The wooden model of the first neighborhood we'd built together remained on the bookshelf. Nothing had changed, except me. Michael smiled. You look good sitting there. I've missed it. My speech was improving every week. Slowly. Carefully. The pauses embarrassed me less than they once had. Michael placed the folder on my desk. The criminal cases are moving toward plea agreements. I nodded. I expected that. There's something else. He hesitated. Melissa wants to see you? The room became quiet. I stared out the window toward the construction site across the street. Workers climbed ladders. Concrete trucks backed into place. Life continued building itself. I'll think about it. Whoa. 3 weeks later, I agreed. Not because she deserved another chance. Because I deserved peace. We met in a quiet counseling office downtown. A neutral place. No lawyers. No cameras. No reporters. Melissa looked older than I remembered. Not physically. Emotionally. The confidence she'd once worn so effortlessly had disappeared. She sat across from me with both hands wrapped around a paper coffee cup. I almost didn't come, she admitted. I almost didn't either. Silence settled between us. Finally, she looked up. I've rehearsed this conversation 100 times. So had I. She nodded. I don't expect you to forgive me. I answered honestly. I already have. Her eyes widened. You have. I forgave you. For me, she frowned. I don't understand. I leaned back. If I carried hatred, you'd still control my life. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I'm sorry. I know. I was greedy. I know. I convinced myself I deserved everything because I took care of you. She covered her face. But somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as my husband. I started seeing you as an opportunity. Those words hurt. Not because they were new, because they were finally honest. She reached into her purse. I brought something. She handed me my wedding ring. I haven't worn mine since the gala. I looked at the ring. Simple gold. Nothing extravagant. I don't want anything from you. She shook her head. I just wanted you to have it back. I placed it gently on the table. You keep it. She looked confused. It belongs to your memories too. She cried harder. There was nothing left to say. We stood. She quietly whispered. I hope someday you remember something good about me. I smiled sadly. I already do. Then I walked away. Not because forgiveness erased what happened, because it never could. A month later, I received an unexpected letter, handwritten, from Tyler. It arrived from the rehabilitation program the court had ordered him to complete as part of his sentence. The first sentence surprised me. I spent my whole life chasing things that belonged to other people because I never built anything of my own. I read the letter twice. There were no excuses. No blaming Melissa. No blaming me. Only regret. Michael asked if I planned to answer. I don't know. Emily smiled. You don't have to decide today. She was right. Some wounds heal quickly. Others deserve time. 6 months after leaving the hospital, I made the biggest decision of my life. I sold the mansion. Everyone assumed I did it because it reminded me of betrayal. They were wrong. The mansion reminded me of success. But success no longer needed 4 stories, 12 fireplaces, or a lakefront view. Home wasn't the building. Home was the people inside it. So I bought a modest lakeside house less than 20 minutes away. 3 bedrooms, a small dock, a wide front porch where I could watch the sunrise with a cup of coffee. It felt peaceful. Emily visited often. Kevin came by on weekends to make sure I kept exercising. Michael and I started fishing again. For the first time in years. My calendar wasn't full. My heart was. The Carter Foundation also changed. Instead of expanding luxury housing initiatives, we created 2 new programs. One provided rehabilitation grants for stroke and accident survivors whose insurance couldn't cover long-term therapy. The other funded scholarships for nursing students committed to compassionate patient care. At the dedication ceremony, I asked Emily to stand beside me. She looked horrified. I hate microphones. I laughed. You'll survive. She reluctantly stepped forward. The audience applauded as I handed her a plaque. It read, Emily Harper Compassionate Care Scholarship. She covered her mouth. You named it after me. You reminded me, and that healing starts when someone believes. There wasn't a dry eye in the room, least of all mine. No. People still ask me whether I regret exposing Melissa and Tyler. My answer always surprises them. No, I regret that they gave me a reason to. Because revenge was never my goal. Truth was, the accident took my voice. For a while, but it gave me something even more valuable. The ability to see people exactly as they were. Some walked away. Some stood beside me. The difference changed my life forever. If there's one lesson my story has taught me, it's this. Never measure your wealth by the size of your house or the balance in your bank account. Measure it by the people who stay when they believe you have nothing left to give. Those are the people worth building a life around. And if this story touched your heart, reminded you of someone you love, or encouraged you to keep choosing integrity, even when it's difficult, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your stories matter too. If you'd like to join me for more stories about resilience, justice, forgiveness, and the strength of the human spirit, I'd be honored if you subscribed and came back for the next journey. Until then, take care of yourself. And never let hardship convince you that your story is over. Sometimes, the quietest voice in the room carries the greatest truth.